Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Preserving Watersheds, the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership. I'm Kelsey Regine, and I'm a project manager with the Wallace Center, who is hosting this webinar today. To start us off, I'm first going to go over some logistics for the webinar, and I'll talk briefly about Wallace Center and Pasture Project, and then we'll get into our presentation with Amy, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for your questions at the end. In terms of Zoom technology, we're all very familiar with it at this point, but we do ask that you keep yourselves muted during the presentation, but you should feel free to put your questions in the chat box as you have them. We'll have time at the end to address them, but feel free to put them in there as you have them so you don't lose track. If you're having any technical difficulties, also feel free to put those questions in the chat box and we'll do what we can to help you out. As you heard, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the Pasture Project YouTube channel in the coming week. All right, so we're going to do some introductions. So the Wallace Center works nationally to bring together diverse people and ideas to co-create solutions that build healthy farms, equitable economies, and resilient food systems. Our vision is that all communities have the power to nourish themselves and regenerate ecosystems through just food and agricultural systems. At the heart of these systems are dynamic networks of people connected through interdependent relationships with each other and the land. And the Pasture Project is an initiative of the Wallace Center that works to advance and integrate regenerative grazing as a scalable, market-driven solution for building healthy soil, viable farms, and resilient communities in the upper Midwest, and specifically a 6-state region in the upper Mississippi River Basin, although we do work with some national audiences. Pasture Project provides farmers, grazers, land managers, and others with data-backed case for the economic, environmental, and social benefits of implementing regenerative grazing. We continue to build a strong alliance of partners for supporting regenerative grazing and other regenerative management practices across the upper Mississippi River Basin. We host webinars like this one as part of our education and outreach efforts to promote regenerative grazing. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit pastureproject.org or more about our other initiatives at Wallace Center, wallacecenter.org. All right, I'm going to introduce our presenter today. We are thrilled to have Amy Crouch with us today. Amy grew up on a small, diverse farm in Northwest Iowa where she was known to wander far and wide following tracks, trails, and butterflies. Holding a BS in biology, she has held several conservation positions in the local area through the years working on water quality, habitat restoration, and soil conservation work. She joined the Nature Conservancy in 2011, where she is the driving force behind the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership, the Little Sioux Grazing Network, the Little Sioux Prescribed Birding Group, and Trailblazers Academy, a women's only prescribed fire experience. Additionally, she spends time working on land management and protection issues with partners, private landowners, and anyone who shows even a vague interest. When not pursuing her passion for rescuing and restoring native landscapes, Amy manages her family's farm and can be seen tending chickens while trailed by assorted cats and her dog, Sheila. So thank you, Amy, for presenting today. We're really lucky to have your expertise. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it off to you. Yeah. Hope you're muted, Amy. We're just having a little.
There we go. How's that?
There we go. Perfect.
Sometimes if you hit that mute button, it'll work.
Oh, yeah.
So as Kelsey said, I'm Amy Crouch. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and today I'm presenting on the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership. As I was going through and trying to think of everything that we do, I know I missed a lot of things. So I may fill in some gaps as we go along. So, whoops, here, let me get my ducks in a row here. There, how's that?
Perfect.
Okay. So, don't know who all is familiar with the state of Iowa, but I want to have some clarification here. Here's the continental United States. We're not Idaho, although I do think I grow some pretty good potatoes in my garden. We're not Ohio. No Wright brothers are here. We are Iowa, just a little north of center, in between the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. Fun fact, Iowa is the only state that is bordered by a river on two sides. And actually we're bordered by three rivers because the Big Sioux River comes into the Missouri River on the western side of the state. So there you have some trivia facts for your friends down at the bar. And I know Iowa is rumored to be flat, but the majority of the state is gently rolling due to repeated glaciation from about 30,000 to 10,000 years ago. So people who come through on our big bike ride called Ragbri, which goes from either east to west or west to east, depending on the year, there are a lot of people who get surprised by how hilly Iowa is. So now that we've established where the state's at, we'll narrow things down a little bit more. The Little Sioux Watershed is located in the northern tallgrass prairie ecoregion, which is on the left side of the screen. It stretches from Alberta down through central Iowa. And many of the last good examples of that northern tallgrass prairie system are in the Little Sioux Watershed in Iowa. This ecoregion is characterized by a shorter growing season and less precipitation than many other tallgrass prairie systems. So it doesn't have quite the abundance of flowers that a lot of the tallgrass prairie does. So if we go in just a little bit more, an easier frame of reference is the Nature Conservancy in Iowa's project map on the right side of the screen. So the Little Sioux River is right there in the northwest corner of the state. It flows for 258 miles, draining close to 2 million acres or almost 3,000 square miles of southwest Minnesota and northwest Iowa. And although the map only shows the Iowa portion of the watershed, we do work closely with our Minnesota colleagues. I'm trying to get partners to overlook political boundaries, but state boundaries are stronger than county boundaries. So we'll come in a little closer yet. So on the right side of the screen is a real close-up of the watershed with some of the counties and cities that are in the watershed. So ecologically, the watershed contains a glacially carved river valley, which is quite steep and still contains some of the best tracts of remnant prairie left in the state. In fact, it's the second highest concentration of prairie in the state after the Luss Hills, which are a string of hills on the very western edge of the state that mirrors the Missouri River. The area also contains pothole and riverine wetlands. We're on the edge of the prairie pothole region. Has rare calcareous fens, which would probably take a whole hour to explain what they are. Bur oak savannas and Iowa's largest natural lakes. It has an abundance of archaeological sites dating from archaic to prehistoric. And due to both the glaciation and thousands of years of prairie, the watershed also contains some of the most productive farmland in the world. And a little closer yet, these are just some of the places, plants, animals, people, and history that make this area so valuable in the most altered state in the nation. So that makes conservation quite a challenge. So because of the unique ecology in the watershed, there are many conservation agencies and organizations that are working here, as this map from the Iowa Wildlife Action Plan illustrates. So this map is pretty cool. It takes every conservation agency and organization that sets foot in Iowa and lines up their priority areas. As you can see, the Great Lakes area, the Little Sioux Watershed, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this circled area up here has some of the brightest purple colors and the most red of any part of the state. So we've got a lot of people working here because of all the cool stuff we've got. So now we'll get into the evolution and growth of the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership in the area. So the early 2000s, TNC brought the organizations that are working in the watershed together to develop a conservation action plan to help conservation practitioners collaboratively develop strategies, take action, measure successes, and adapt and learn over time. This planning is an iterative process that is ever evolving. In fact, we are currently updating our plan right now. At this point in the early 2000s, the focus of the planning for the watershed was on prairie, savanna, and woodland management and restoration and archaeological preservation of Native American sites. Once that planning was finished, or the first iteration was finished, the CAP team wanted to make sure that the plan was implemented. They decided to keep meeting, and this partnership evolved into the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership with the goals of influencing, increasing, and targeting terrestrial conservation work at a watershed scale. We're a loose partnership with no official status by design. Our power is in our partnership, and the power is also in the individual agencies, organization, and people who make up our partnership, as opposed to having another nonprofit organization or rolling this into some unit of government. So over time, the focus evolved to include water quality and quantity issues, sustainable grazing and regenerative agriculture practices, and bringing in more partners such as private landowners, colleges, communities, and soil and water conservation districts. And very briefly here, we'll talk more about our current work, but it includes encouraging counties and municipalities to embrace the benefits of working beyond political boundaries, which is harder than you may imagine, influencing flood reduction infrastructure to be more green than gray, expanding grazing opportunities, and increasing the amount of prescribed fire on the land. And as I said, I'll get into this a little more later on in the presentation. So we have amazing partners. These folks are truly awesome. This slide shows our most active partner organizations and agencies, but it doesn't begin to show the depth and breadth of our individual and collective work. There are close to 100 people on our contact list. Some of them are repeats from these organizations that are on the slide right now, but there are many who kind of hang around the edges and keep an eye on what we're doing without actually participating. For over 30 years, conservation partners have been targeting personal effort and grant funds to the area for prairie, savanna, and wetland preservation and restoration on both private and public lands. The LSWCP, which is the acronym for the partnership because it's Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership is a mouthful, as is LSWCP, but not quite the mouthful that the full words are. So the LSWCP brings these efforts together to target conservation efforts in the watershed to make a bigger collective impact than any one organization or group could do on their own. And as with most of Iowa, the project area, the watershed, is mostly privately owned. So it's about 98% privately owned. That makes landowners and producers key partners in nearly everything we do. So the partnership created priority areas in the watershed using a number of criteria, including the amount of protected land in an area, vulnerable ecological communities like remnant prairie, fens, pothole wetlands, etc. The concentration of archaeological sites, which coincide quite a bit with these protected areas and vulnerable ecological communities, as you can imagine. And there are other things that went into it. It was about a 1.5-year process to get everyone to come to a consensus on where these priority areas should be and how they should be delineated. We ended up going with watershed boundaries because before we put in kind of arbitrary seeming boundaries, they actually followed the amount of prairie that was left and the protected areas, but they would not hold true through time. So watershed boundaries typically do not change over time. So we figured that that was the best way to create our targeted areas. So these priority areas are used to target conservation efforts in a logical manner, especially when applying for grant money or conducting research. We developed ranking criteria in conjunction with these priority areas to further target and prioritize protection, restoration, and management efforts. So although these are our priority areas, we do work throughout the watershed. We have 99 county conservation boards in the state of Iowa. So every county in Iowa has a county conservation board. They all own land, which is there anything from municipal pools to wildlife preserves, depending on the county. So there is work throughout the watershed, but as a collective, we target these 3 areas for the main stem of our terrestrial work. Our row crop agriculture work is a newer effort, and that is throughout the watershed and has ties in with our water quality efforts. And the Little Sioux is a dynamic river with a long history of flooding. We've been working with county engineers and municipalities to move flood reduction practices away from concrete and to more natural solutions such as oxbow wetlands and permanent vegetation in floodplains. These practices have the added benefits of attracting outdoor tourism and giving locals more recreational opportunities, which people are always looking for in Iowa. That they did a survey a few years ago to see how they could attract more workers to Iowa, and that was the #1 thing, was having more outdoor recreational opportunities. So in addition to our priority areas, we also have objectives. So these are our current objectives, which in our conservation action plan, which I kind of glossed over, but it has a lot of threat assessment and targeting algorithms, and there's just a lot of math and figuring behind the scenes that, thank goodness, computers do a lot of it. But our priorities and our objectives come off of our threat assessment and target assessments, which they're within the CAP. And you will see at the end the link to our website, which you can find our conservation action plan there if you really want to dig into the document. And if you would like to know how to do such a plan, my information is at the end also. So you can get a hold of me and I can find the planning matrices for you. So these are our current objectives for 2025. And they were determined by the partners via committee and then group consensus. So the committees went out, everybody had a topic, they determined what the objective should be, what the metrics were, and how to reach those metrics, and then came back to the group, and everybody through several meetings vetted those to streamline them more, make them more realistic in some cases and achievable. So this is only a 10,000 foot view. Each objectives has a SMART goal, resource needs, precise metrics, and then activities or steps to achieve those metrics. And as I said, these are 2025 goals. So coming up pretty soon, next year, we'll be working on revising those for the next 5 years. Some of them we have achieved greatly, and some of them we have not. And we're learning from all of it. We keep good track of our successes and our failures, so we can learn from both of those and be able to grow and adjust and keep this plan moving, not just give up on it because we've had something that didn't work out the way that we expected and so we're done. We won't do that. This is a long haul game we're in right here. So we're going to drill down into some of our ongoing projects now. The Little Sioux Grazing Network was started with the help of a Natural Resource Conservation Service Conservation Innovation Grant. So here's another place I'm going to use an acronym, or NRCS SIG. You've got to use those acronyms, or one, you're not working in the conservation world, and two, you're gonna run out of voice saying all these words. So there are several grazers in our watershed because of the steep gravelly hillsides that were created by the glacier. And pardon me, I'm getting sun here. I'm having a hard time seeing. So luckily, those hillsides are currently too difficult or unproductive to farm. So we still have some of this prairie saved, and it's mainly grazed by cattle, but there are a few sheep farmers in the area, but mostly cattle producers. So we reached out to grazers that we knew and told them our idea before we applied for this grant. They thought it was a great one. They started recruiting some of their friends and fellow grazers, and they shared information with these other grazers. We then invited everyone to a kickoff meeting where we introduced them to the project and started getting ideas for what they thought would be helpful to help them have a better productivity with their grazing, manage their grass better, manage their animals better. In some cases, work less hard because of different practices that they could do. So we got a big list of what they wanted to achieve and what their challenges were. And then we found speakers, put together workshops, field days, develop fact sheets based upon these topics. So there's just an example of a couple field days and then one fact sheet that we printed from this, but we have a lot more in our archives. So another aspect of this project was building community. So we held monthly pasture walks at different members' farms, and they kind of told us about the history of their farm. You know, in most cases, it was my great-grandfather came out here and settled the land. And this has been pasture for 150 years since settlement by Europeans. But after you got that background, they would open up a little more and say, you know, I've got this gully I'm having trouble with. The calves are getting stuck in the mud when they cross through, and then people would help them brainstorm on how to remedy that. Or the cattle are staying here and not moving there, and you know, different ways of using patch burn grazing or semi-permanent fencing to get them to go different places. It was really neat listening to these people make connections and create this community with people they'd never met before. It was really cool. So COVID, of course, reared its ugly head and brought these in-person meetings and field days to an end. But emails still flow among the members and to members of the LSWCP. And we plan to restart field days in 2024. And as I said earlier, the vast majority of land in the Little Sioux Watershed, but in Iowa in general, is privately owned. So public and recreational landowners are starting to come around to the benefits of grazing as a management tool, but have no way to manage loading and unloading animals in certain places. There are places they just couldn't graze because they could maybe get animals there, but they sure couldn't get them rounded back up. So we purchased a portable corral system to facilitate more ecological grazing on public and private lands. There's a user agreement that they have to sign saying that they will not increase their herd because they have this extra land to graze, but they will allow the pasture that they're not in to rest. So it gets a better recovery, and or they can put a prescribed fire on it, which reinvigorates the prairie. That allows for better ecological management of the overall landscape and better profits for the landowner when the grass is managed better. A partner purchased a portable livestock scale to help quantify some of the benefits of grazing natives. So we're collecting rates of gain on a few pastures. Our pasture systems here in the Little Sioux Watershed are quite similar to the Prairie Katoa region in South Dakota. But since it's South Dakota and not Iowa, the grazers say that the research that's done over there does not apply to here, which from an ecological standpoint is not accurate, but you know, people will believe what they believe. So we are doing some research within the watershed to help get some data to show people locally that these things can be done and have value. We're also exploring more research opportunities to validate and promote sustainable grazing in the watershed. And then throughout Iowa too, we really want to take what we learn here and replicate it or magnify it throughout the state and farther if we can, to try and get some good grazing management on a lot of land that needs it. And one way we are doing that is through virtual fence research. So this is through TNC, who is also a partner in the partnership. We decided to do a pilot project with No Fence, which is a virtual fence company from Norway who has just recently come into the United States. And they have an electronic fencing system that works off GPS satellites and cell phones. So we chose to do this to negate the risk to our public partners and to private producers and landowners. So we have private producers who rent our preserves to graze their cattle so they have some more grass for their animals, and so we can have some good grazing management on our preserves. And with these people, we can work with them to see if they'd be open to the idea of having these collars on their animals and to seeing the benefits or or drawbacks of having this technology. So we still had perimeter fences, but we took out all of our cross fencing at this time to use the boundaries that you could create with the no fence system. So it interfaces with a desktop computer and with your phone. You can put an app on your phone. You can draw pastures, and the cell signal will, if I get this right, the cell signal will send that to the collars. So when your animals get close to what the boundary will be, there's a chime that starts to go. And you first put them in a small training pasture, which has regular boundary fences, and then you put your no fence, just you like cut off one end of the pasture. So they learn that this is a boundary that they can't cross, and they learn very quickly how to manage that boundary. They very seldom get shocked. There are 3 chimes leading up to, they get louder and longer the closer that they get to the boundary. And if they get to that boundary, it will shock them. And normally that is more than enough to get them to back off. It's completely safe. It's been vetted by a lot of animal organizations and has been determined to be not harmful to the animals at all. And they're really smart. They pick up on it. They're a lot smarter than humans are. When we have something with caffeine in it, we want more. When animals have something that's weird and makes them feel funny, they just walk away. They don't want more. They don't want to mess with that anymore. But I suppose that's really enough about human behavior. So back to the virtual fence. Towards the end of the grazing season, which for us was from April to October, we held a field day where there were, we didn't have a huge turnout, but it was, I think timing was just the main thing for that. But we are working on writing up our findings to share with partners and landowners and other conservation agencies, whoever would like this information, so they can see what we witnessed, the good and the bad of this technology. So we did this last year. So we have one grazing season under our belt. And we are going to switch to a different virtual fence company for this coming year. We were lucky enough to get a grant from a foundation to do some more virtual fence research for another few years. So I'm looking forward to trying this new company. We decided not to go with no fence. They were having a few shakeups corporately, and we just didn't want to chance that that was going to impact what we were trying to accomplish. So we decided to go with another fencing company that is very similar in their product, but is based in the US. So stay tuned for more of that information. I'll make sure to share it with Kelsey once we get it put together. So another effort we have is the Little Sioux Cooperative Burning Group, which I didn't name, that's what they wanted to call it. So another mouthful. It's an arm of the partnership with the purpose of increasing the amount of good fire on the landscape and to mentor landowners and young professionals coming into the natural resources realm. This partnership also helps people see things on more of a landscape scale rather than county to county. And the individuals who are part of the partnership right now see this, but through the Cooperative Burn Week, their directors and governing boards have a more tangible way of looking at and seeing what cooperative work can do. So we started our first cooperative fire in 2018. And since then, we have worked up to doing a cooperative burn week. So all partners are on hand for this week. They commit to any days that we have burn weather that we will coordinate and work together. And normally we do several fires in a day. The Little Sioux Watershed is very long and linear. So rather than having everybody meet in a central location, we take the fire people who are in the south, the fire people who are in the center, the fire people that are in the north, and we group them together so we can get larger burn units done in, throughout the watershed. So for our first cooperative burn week in 2022, we got a little over 1,000 acres of prescribed fire done, and we only had 2 days with good burn weather. So that was mind-blowing to many of the partners. In 2023, we do this in the spring. So in 2023, we also only had 2 days of good burn weather, and we got over 1,300 acres done. Now, this is just with partners within the watershed, no landowners yet, no volunteers or local fire departments. This is to build cohesiveness and collaboration and let those supervisors and boards see what this can do. Also to get the bugs worked out before we bring in more groups and volunteers and landowners to do this. We don't want to have them come and then we have a big logistical snafu because we are inexperienced at this. We want them to have a good experience, and we want our people to be cohesive enough on their burn activities that you can jump in with one squad and get the same experience you would get with another squad. So 1,000 acres, 1,300 acres, it may not seem like a lot, especially to people who are out west, but the average burn unit in the watershed, whether it's CRP or a public entity, is around 40 acres before we started doing this collaborative burning. So we have really, really increased the number of acres that are getting good ecological fire on them just exponentially. So it's been a great effort, and I am really eager to see how next year pans out, and the year after that, and the year after that. As I mentioned earlier, everything we're doing here is for longevity. You know, we're building things up now, but we really want this to keep going after all of us who are currently working in the watershed are gone. We also do a lot of outreach and education. So through our partnerships, the LSWCP itself, and our county conservation boards each have a naturalist who go out and do a lot of public programming. So through these three different ways, we lead and participate in field days and workshops for both conservation professionals and private landowners. And then also through one-on-one interactions in our daily work, we do a lot of educating and outreach on land management practices, cattle productivity. We have so many varied partners that we can really touch on nearly every aspect of life in the watershed. And we also bring the magic of the Little Sioux Watershed to 15 to 20,000 people each year at the Clay County Fair, which is a large regional fair in Northwest Iowa. When I was growing up, they always called it the Clay County State Fair because it's very large. So they have a building called the Sunhome Conservation Cabin, and we are in there with our other partners, and we have a video that it's a flyover video of the watershed using GIS mapping, and it's just really neat. People stand and watch and figure out where their house is, and just are really fascinated by it, and it brings up a lot of great conversations and interactions with visitors. So we really reach a lot of people. And then we also attend and participate in other events such as conferences and local festivals. And that has also helped increase the recognition of the partnership statewide and further than that. So through the years, we have discovered that conservation can't be done the way that it's always been done in the past. We have to seek out non-traditional partners and new projects that we probably wouldn't have thought of before in order to get conservation done, and in order to make sure that people understand the why and the how. So a few of these non-traditional things that we've been doing in the last few years are facilitating informational meetings to help county engineers and emergency managers figure out a way to reduce flood impacts on roads and towns in the watershed. So we've been leading watershed-wide efforts to create watershed management authorities throughout the project area. So these authorities were put into law by the legislature in 2010, I believe. They're poorly named. They do not have any authority. So it's a group of municipalities, counties, soil and water conservation district, and stakeholders, or the public, to cooperatively engage in watershed planning and management. Now, mostly in the Little Sioux, the focus has been on flood reduction, and now we're in a drought. So, it may be toward how to conserve water in a drought. We have a lot of confined animal facilities, so we have a lot of water being pulled from the ground and from our rivers and lakes to take care of these animals. So, what's a way of doing that so we don't deplete the resource for fish and people and animals and plants downstream? So we've been working to bring the WMA model to scale since 2019. And once again, COVID came into the picture, and the meetings with supervisors and city councils and the public came to a standstill. They had a lot more important issues at the time, a lot more timely issues to deal with when the pandemic came than to try and figure out watershed management authorities. So we have not revisited that yet. We've spoken to a few county supervisors and city council people, and they have just said that, the interest is not there right at this time. They're still dealing with some of the aftermath of the pandemic. So we have shifted gears a bit, and we're working with the city and county of Cherokee to get a FEMA grant to demonstrate the value of working with diverse partners and use natural infrastructure and ag practices to decrease flooding impacts. So rather than building dikes and cement storm sewers, we're working to build oxbow wetlands and seed down the floodplain, use it for parks or pasture land to try and decrease the amount of water that's coming straight down the river and the larger streams. So due to this work, we got in with the Iowa Flood Center and talked to them about some things, and they had a project where they were modeling on-road structures. So these would be places where counties need to revitalize a bridge or a culvert and are looking to use that to hold back water. And from this modeling that they're doing in just a few target watersheds, then they will extrapolate from there for the entire state. So some of the partners that we've reached out to with these different projects are, for-profit corporations, the Canadian National Railway Company, private water quality labs, and more local businesses and such. Conservation just keeps getting more interesting and complicated as time goes on. And I see we're getting short, so I will speed things up. Just want to shout out one more time to the partners in the Little Sioux partnership. They're amazing. The people who are active in the partnership understand that we achieve more working together. And word's getting out about the collaboration. We have more people asking if they can join our mailing list every year. We do get new people who become active in the partnership also. And it's just great. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me ramble for 50 minutes. Here's my contact information and the Little Sioux Watershed Conservation Partnership information.
Awesome. Wow, Amy, thank you so much. That was amazing. I really felt like I'm part of a very, very small partnership, and as in my role at Pasture Project, and I got a lot of ideas from this, so thank you for sharing. And just like the amount of work y'all do is really very impressive. and inspiring, and like a small portion of the state, the amount of stuff that you can get done. Like imagine if there were more of these across the state or bigger consortiums, or it's really very cool.
Hmm.
Um, if y'all have questions for Amy, feel free to put them in the chat box. I do see that we have a couple already. In here, one about, do you have any results from your grazing study that you're willing to share? It sounds like this person is working on building out a library of research on animal performance of grazing.
From the no fence study or the rates of gain and such?
I don't see it specified. Lexi, feel free to come off mute if you want to elaborate a little bit on your
Oh, the rates
question.
of gain. No,
Oh,
we
great.
don't yet. But we're looking to get that to start compiling things. Hopefully next year. The drought kind of threw things off.
Mm, as it does, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, well, stay tuned, Lexi. And then I also see Lexi asked a question about the name of the US-based virtual fence company, if you could repeat that.
that is Corral Technologies, I believe. I got that right. And they're out of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Awesome. Thank you. And then another question in here, do you only use cattle in the watershed, or do you utilize poultry as well? I'm wondering if they mean like, do you work with poultry producers at all in your work?
Oh, we don't really have, we have a few pastured poultry producers, but they they don't really utilize the native prairies, the native
Mm-hmm.
prairie pastures. They use more European or tame mixes, which
Mm-hmm.
that kind of falls under the Iowa State University recommendations rather than our
Mm-hmm.
recommendations.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, yeah, I gotta thank you. A little shout out. Um, if y'all have more questions for Amy, feel free to put them in the chat box or feel free to come off mute. I have a question that I was sitting with Amy. Like I said, I'm part of a very small consortium partnership that's focused primarily on grazing. And I'm just wondering, like, y'all have been doing this for so long. How do you keep up and sustain the momentum of your efforts, with people that work at organizations that like leave jobs and new people come in? Like, how do you keep this, like, all this work going and the momentum? Because like you said, you're not a formal organization, so it's kind of up to each individual. Do you have any like strategies for that?
Oh, it's a big challenge. It really is.
Hmm.
What works the most is having things scheduled like field days and workshops. Having
Hmm.
meetings scheduled, people, you can always find something to do rather than go to a meeting. But having field days and workshops really seems to keep people motivated to come. At one point, we had 7 people who came on a regular basis,
Mm.
and we had a lot of turnover. We've got a lot of younger people who are just starting out now, and I don't know what the reason is, but for some reason they've been told that this is a priority. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that helps. And I do find that, since the pandemic, any in-person time you can get is really just so valuable. And
Definitely.
people really feel like it's like we forget how important that is and how rejuvenating that is to bring people together to like see the efforts um, in real time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm involved in some ecosystem restoration work in Northern Illinois. And one thing that we've been trying to figure out is pesticide, herbicide drift onto some of the natural areas here. And I'm wondering if you all have encountered that or have addressed that. Yeah, especially like I do about working with farmers on that.
Yeah, we've definitely encountered it. It seems like the co-ops, they get so many, they're the main ones who spray here. They get so many orders to spray that, and people keep asking, why haven't you sprayed? Why haven't you sprayed? That they go out on some days that they really should not be out spraying.
Mm.
Even with the newer equipment, with the low flow nozzles and where you can shut things off, it's a problem. most people who are neighbors adjacent to these native areas are pretty good about trying to keep things away if they do things themselves. There are a few who just don't quite see the benefit of having natural areas. So they're not quite as accommodating or conscious of what they do to their neighbor.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done to spread awareness of that.
Yeah, and my thinking is like the better working relationships we can have with folks who border those areas, the better. It's hard, you know, there are a lot of kind of absentee landowners that aren't actually involved in managing the land, and it just suddenly you're talking to 4 different people and it's not clear who's making any of those decisions. So it is complicated.
Yeah, and you've got it right there. The relationships are key, and we try to have good relationships or a relationship with anybody who is a neighbor of ours, for our benefit and their benefit. Because if we see their cattle out, you know, we're going to give them a holler and let them know that your animals are out and help them put them in if we can. We try to be good neighbors.
Yeah, being good neighbors, communicating the message, you know, like all of that is really important. And just building relationships is something that I think people in this work in general forget that takes a lot of time and is so important to success of any conservation project, any like grazing work scope that you're doing. It's just, I can't, like, that's one thing I always, you know, say to folks is like, take the time to get to know the people in your area and the organizations and what their goals are. Because you'd be surprised how you might think this one organization or group is completely opposed to what you're doing, but if you just take the time to talk with them, you'll find some overlapping goals and priorities. So,
Yep.
you know, yeah, and a partnership like what you have too, it's like it's about bringing people together that have maybe some, you know, have some you know, overlapping goals, but might also not, and just finding those places that you can work together.
Yeah,
That's
you
really
can,
important.
given enough time, you can always find something you have in common.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is a really good lesson for everything, for everyone to take home
Yes.
in every part of your life, especially these days. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat. I thank everybody for coming today. We're almost right at time. And I want to thank Amy again for taking the time to present to us today and share what you have been doing and what you've learned. I think it's super valuable and something that people can do where they live, in their county, in their watershed, in their state. These are lessons that can certainly be used in so many places. So I'm going to drop, Amy shared her email address, and I'm going to drop contacts for the Wall Center and Amy's email address in the chat. And so feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions or want some follow-up. And we will be, like I said, this has been recorded and we will be posting it in the coming week along with Amy's slides. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and keep a lookout for more opportunities of these kind of webinars. And if you have ideas for future webinars, please feel free to reach out to us as well. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.